Hey guys and gals, I hope and pray that you are doing well. Congrats to the seniors who are graduating somewhat this week, and I think some of them are next week as well. I hope that you are proud of your accomplishment. We are proud of you. We miss you all. Just a few things to highlight before we jump into today's devotion. And the first is that camp is happening. It is still happening as far as we know. We will keep you updated, but that is going to be the last week of July. So July 27th through 31st. We're going to be up in Montana, and I hope that all of you can go. But just be looking for more information from me on that. We are excited and can't wait to hopefully go with as many youth as can come. But again, the last week of July, so keep that on your calendars. Secondly, big news more for the immediate is we are going to be resuming youth group in a few weeks. So again, mark your calendars for Wednesday, June 10th. Wednesday, June 10th is we're going to be having a welcome back party, just a time for us to fellowship, hang out, catch up with one another, maybe even play a few games. There will be food, but we will safely distribute that food. So we can't wait to see y'all's faces, and I am so looking forward to it. So again, June 10th, 6:30 to 8:30 for those who might have forgot what time youth group starts from all of this quarantine, and we will see you there. Please feel free to reach out to myself or Sebastian or even your breakout group leaders with any questions. And then my last announcement is this. Next Monday is Memorial Day, and Seb and I are actually going to take a break from Mark for a week and upload a conversation from a few of the questions that you all had written down whenever we were actually still meeting and we had surveyed you. So we're going to try to answer a few of those questions. Both of us will record it together, and we're going to upload that. It might be a slightly little longer conversation, but we're actually going to give your breakout group leaders just a break for the week, and so we will not be having breakout groups next Wednesday. Okay, so there will be no breakout groups next Wednesday, the 27th. So just keep that in mind, but they will resume the week after for those few weeks before we start meeting again on June 10th. So camp is July 27th through 31st. Youth group starts back up on June 10th, and then no breakout groups for next week. So please enjoy time with your family, your friends, your loved ones. Let's jump into today's passage. It's a short one, but there is a lot to uncover. Mark 12. And in a moment, we're going to start reading from verse 38. But to remind you of Mark 12, so far we've seen in this chapter a parable of the vineyard owner, how the hired workers treated the master's servants terribly and even his son terribly. And we looked at the question of who to give money to, God or Caesar, in which Jesus famously answers, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. And then we looked at the Sadducees and their questions about the resurrection, since they don't believe that there is a resurrection, and how Jesus expertly answers them and proves to them from the book that they actually accept that there is a resurrection. And then last week, Seb looked at the greatest commandment, really the law of love for the New Testament, if you will. Love God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind, and then love your neighbor as yourself. So we still find ourselves in chapter 12, and the theme of this chapter has been one of teaching, one of correcting. Jesus corrects the religious leaders, the scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and he is teaching his disciples, and by extension teaching us, what life in the kingdom is really like. And so today's story is no different. Let's go ahead and read from Mark 12, starting in verse 38. Verse 38, he also said in his teaching, beware of the scribes, who want to go around in long robes and who want greetings in the marketplaces, the best seats in the synagogues, and the places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses and say long prayers just for show. These will receive harsher judgment. Verse 41, sitting across from the temple treasury, he watched how the crowd dropped money into the treasury. Many rich people were putting in large sums. Then a poor widow came and dropped in 2 tiny coins worth very little. Summoning his disciples, he said to them, truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their surplus, but she out of her poverty has put in everything she had, all she had to live on. So in these two scenes, we see a warning about the scribes, and we also see the widow giving her all. And these two scenes are meant to be compared and contrasted for us. We've already seen throughout Mark, Jesus mention a coming judgment, something that is going to happen at the end of the age. And he's mentioned this judgment multiple times. And here he does so again. He's basically saying these guys who parade themselves around and act self-righteously towards others, who want to be praised by others, they're going to receive a harsher judgment. They're going to receive a very harsh judgment. So real quick, just two things I want to highlight in this devotion for you guys from this passage, from Mark 12, from the end of it. And the first is this: God is watching. God is watching. It's a simple statement, yet a statement that reminds us that we are seen, we are cared for, our struggles are known. But the flip side of that coin is that He is watching when we disobey as well, when we sin, even when we think that no one is. So these scribes who, as I said earlier, love to be seen, who love to be greeted publicly, they are full of themselves. In a sense, like the Sadducees, they are living as if this is the only life we have. They're not even thinking about eternity to come and the judgment that's going to take place and how we ought to be living in light of that. They're living for the recognition that they receive from man, not the recognition that they will one day receive from God. Even in the story of the widow, she has no idea that Jesus, God Himself, is physically watching her. But He is. And she is actually living like God is watching her. The scribes are motivated by a love for themselves ultimately, the fame, the recognition, all of what they receive from mankind. But she is motivated by her love for God. You see, we have to remember the context. This is a time when in Jerusalem it is filled with people. It's the time of the Passover. And from the Jewish histories, we know that near the temple where this story is actually taking place, there were these 13 large brass chests called trumpets because they were shaped like an upside-down horn. So you can imagine that they were narrow at the top with an opening, and then they went down and they got wider so that they could collect the money. And then it was basically a large basin to collect the offerings during the Passover. And these 13 were designated for various things. Some of them were designated for the wood offerings. Some of them were designated to collect even gold, or to buy gold for the temple and the overlays that it had. And 6 of them were just free will offerings that people could give freely to the temple. And so you get the picture that the place around the temple is buzzing during Passover as people are coming to give. And in some measure, this has turned into exactly what God does not want. You have the scribes parading themselves around and expecting greetings and praise from the people. And then you have the rich people who come and give a lot. The text says large sums is what it says. Many people were putting in large sums. So large amounts of coins, large amounts of money. But imagine as all the coin dropped into the brass container, into the brass horns, the brass chest, the sound of it that would have went up amongst the crowd. So I grew up collecting spare change because I didn't have money when I was little and I wanted to be able to buy things. And my parents said that I had to collect some spare change. So I would do chores around the house for change. And then my dad would often bring home some spare change from the vending machines that he was working on. And so I would fill up these big jars I had, and when it got full, we would take it to the grocery store and put it in one of those machines that counts it for you. But if you've ever done that before, you know that it is loud. You can hear every coin dropping onto the metal tray. You can hear it as the machine counts it and adds it to the total. It is a loud process. So just imagine what is happening as these rich people are bringing their offerings and putting them in. Coin after coin, clanging and echoing loudly around the plaza. There's probably some oohs and ahs as they hear how much is being dumped into each of the container from some of these rich people. And maybe even rich person after rich person is trying to one-up the person before them. So they were giving not only out of their surplus, as Jesus says, they aren't giving sacrificially, but they are most likely giving for the recognition that they will receive amongst their fellow man, not the recognition, not the ultimate devotion to the Lord. And then the widow comes, and again, to compare and contrast from the rich to the widow now, who is very poor, and she gives 2 tiny coins. So small they were called lepta, which literally means the thinnest of coins. And this was worth 1/400th of a shekel, or 1/8 of a penny today. 1/8 of a penny. It was next to nothing. And it is super, super thin metal. You could probably even bend it very easily, right? So it's the lowest of low in the currencies. And as it dropped in, there was no sound. Nothing at all compared to those who had just dropped in their large sums of coins that echoed throughout the crowd. She wasn't giving this for the recognition. She was giving this out of her devotion. She had given all she had in the hopes that God would see her and recognize her and recognize her love for him. And he did. Because when it comes to giving, and this is important, when it comes to giving, and when it comes to the posture of our hearts, that posture makes all the difference. This can be giving of money, yes, which most of you probably don't have much of unless you are working, but it's also the giving of our time, our talents, our resources, giving of all of those things. When someone has to pay their taxes to the IRS does not care about your heart. It doesn't care about the attitude whenever you're actually giving or writing that check to them or giving the money that you owe. They just want the money. Now, it's not like this with our Lord. He cares about our hearts first and foremost. Jesus didn't praise the rich people who gave. He praised the widow who gave so little because her heart was in the right place. So Paul says in 1 Corinthians that if I give away all I have and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but I have not love, I gain nothing. We have to align our hearts with what God cherishes and values, not what we do. So God was watching, and he does recognize how we live and how we give. He's always watching, always caring for us, as I said earlier. He sees our struggles, our sufferings, our joys, our love, our sin, and our sorrows. He sees it all. So may we be encouraged. May we be encouraged by that and possibly even convicted. We need to live our lives in light of what is to come, in light of eternity, in light of the judgment that will one day take place, not just for today, not just for the here and the now as the scribes and even the rich people were trying to give, not just for what our fellow man might say to us, but ultimately for what God will say to us. So may each of us know and be reminded that God is watching, and may we live in light of that. But secondly, and real quick, what I want to point out from this is that God can do great things from tiny offerings. God can do great things with tiny offerings. Those 2 little coins, again equaling 1/4 of a penny, and given quietly with a widow's motive, have produced so much more for the kingdom in the intervening 2,000 years than all the other gifts presented during that Passover week. So nobody remembers those other gifts. Even the large sums are just recorded, but nobody really knows how much. Nobody really knows about the people who are giving. But because of how she gave and the reality that God saw her, she is remembered. This widow is remembered, and it has produced so much for the kingdom. In the 2,000 years since, those 2 tiny coins have been multiplied into billions and billions for God's work as humble people have been freed to give from the little that they have, to give what they can, to know that it doesn't matter so much as to the amount, but the actual heart behind it. To know that God sees their gift and understands the heart and the motivation for giving. So this ultimately is meant for our encouragement. We know that to whom much is given, much is expected. But our status in life, our wealth, our position in this world is of least importance in our worship of God. He invites all to come to him, all who are heavy laden and weary, all who have a humble spirit and who recognize their need for him. He is seeking those who worship in spirit and in truth, who love him fully and give all of their lives out of love for him. So do you believe that? You might feel as though you are unseen, even in the midst of this quarantine. But do you know that God sees you? You might feel as though you have nothing to offer. You don't have that many talents. You don't have much money. You don't have many resources. But this text, this example from the widow shows us that God can use even the tiniest of offerings, the tiniest of things to do great things for the kingdom. So I pray that you do believe that you would not see your life as insignificant, but as of a great worth that can and will be used for the glory of God. So be encouraged that he uses us who are weak to accomplish mighty things for his kingdom. Let's go ahead and pray. Father, I thank you for today. I thank you for this devotion from your word. I thank you for the comparison in what we ought to learn from the scribes and from the rich who give out of a show, who want the praise and the recognition of their fellow man. I pray that you would help each of us to be more like this widow, who probably didn't even know that this would be recorded, who didn't know that Jesus was watching her, but what she has done and what Jesus has told us about what she has done has influenced the lives of millions of people since. So I pray that we would be reminded that you are watching, and that we would be encouraged by that, but also reminded that we ought to be pursuing and living holy lives. But I pray also that we would be reminded that you can use the tiniest of offerings for great things in your kingdom. For you are the God who multiplies these things so much more than we can think or imagine. Pray that you would be encouraging each of these students. I can't wait until June 10th. I pray that all who can would be able to be there, and may you be with us throughout the rest of this week. In your son's name we pray. Amen. We'll see you guys.